marriage, parenting, business. It all comes with patterns. Some of them help us grow. Some of them get us stuck. The Enneagram is one of those tools that can help us see ourselves a little clearer and understand the people we love a little better.
Today, we're starting part 1 of an amazing 2-part series with Michael Burdett Norton. Michael is a coach, teacher, and facilitator who works with families, couples, and teams around the world. He's funny, he's real, and he has a way of breaking down the Enneagram without making it feel like a personality box.
And if you've never heard of the Enneagram, don't worry. This episode is about the basics, what it is, how it works, and how it can help us with marriage, parenting, and leadership. And if you're already familiar, you'll get a fresh perspective from someone who's helped leaders, couples, and even entire companies use it to grow.
We'll also share a bit of our own journey, how learning our types has helped us have more empathy, communicate better, and see each other with fresh eyes.
So whether you're curious, skeptical, or somewhere in between, this conversation is about awareness, compassion, and growth. Let's jump in with Michael Burdett Norton. Life isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. And along the way, we all stumble, learn, and keep going.
Welcome to Running Ahrens, a podcast about navigating marriage, parenting, business, faith, and all the unexpected detours that come along with it.
We're Justin and Sarah Ahrens, partners in life, business, and raising 4 incredible kids.
For over 30 years, we've been figuring things out as we go. Sometimes successfully, and sometimes, well, not so much.
But that's the beauty of hindsight. We're here to share the lessons we've learned, the wins, the failures, and the moments that have shaped us.
Through honest conversations, special guests, and maybe even a few stories from our kids, we'll explore what it really takes to grow, adapt, and move forward.
So whether you're running a business, a household, or just running late,
you're in the right place. Let's do this together.
We're glad you're here. Welcome to Running Ahrens.
Michael, we're so glad you're here with us today. And before we jump in, we'd like to take a minute for you to introduce yourself, tell our listeners who you are, what you do, and why the Enneagram has become such a big part of your work and life.
Ooh, fun. Okay.
Jump in. That's a big question.
At first, it's great to be here. I love talking about the Enneagram. I love people who love to talk about the Enneagram. So yeah, as you said, my name is Michael Norton. I'm a coach with the Conscious Leadership Group, coach and facilitator there. And I also work a lot with the Enneagram within that context. My background is actually, I used to be a director in the theater. I began my journey in the theater at the same time that my parents were beginning their journey into consciousness. My stepdad is Jim Dethmer, who wrote the book, The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. My mom, who you two know, is Debbie Burdett, who has worked with the Enneagram for many, many years. And so while they were studying with the Gay and Kathleen Hendricks, I was overdoing theater school. And I remember coming home and kind of telling them stories about like what we were doing, you know, the wild experiments of presence, of persona. And it actually kind of mapped on what some of the layers of self-awareness that they were exploring as well. So it's like we were both in this world of, you know, persona, candor, emotional honesty, play, creativity at the same time. And they went off and started working in teams and businesses around the world. And I went off to make theater in Europe. And theater is a uniquely collective art form. It really demands a tight container of people who you can trust, where you can be vulnerable. It demands clear agreements, like lights fall on people if you don't make clear agreements. It really requires a sense of intuition. And I think in terms of the Enneagram, a sense of we're in a living experimentation of community. We're moving quickly, we're making decisions, we're talking about humans and human behavior, but also underneath that, human motivation. I really used the Enneagram as a framework for most of my career there. And then eventually just saw that I was actually more interested in practicing these tools of conscious leadership and the Enneagram than I was in actually making the art form. And so I started transitioning. It felt like this obvious choice. And so now I sit with leaders kind of in the same way that I sit with actors. I really listen from presence. I notice what feels authentic. I name when something isn't working. And we use the Enneagram constantly as a tool of awareness of what's underneath the driving forces of your life? Where do you keep getting stuck? When you get reactive, how does that uniquely show up based on your Enneagram type? We all have different styles of reactivity. It's not like we all just storm off and fight in the same way. Some of us might get very people-pleasy. Some of us might freeze and go in a different direction. So the Enneagram helps us. It's like a fast-track system to see the scaffolding of our personality. And then in essence, it helps us to see you are not that. You don't need to be stuck in that same structure. This is the box that you believe yourself to be in. The Enneagram not only points to that box, but it really points to what would it be like to step out of it. It's ultimately a tool of transformation, not just a typology, I am a 3, so therefore I like competition.
Could you just give a brief intro for those who are listening, have no idea what the Enneagram is or have heard of it? Could you just say, what is a 1? What is a 2? What is a 3?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So let's actually start with type 8, because there's a little bit of logic around that of what we call centers of intelligence. So the Enneagram teaches us that there's a head type, a heart type, and a body type. We all have all 3 centers, but there's a cluster of types around each of those centers. So the type 8, 9, and 1 are all body types. That tends to mean they have a little bit more of a relationship to the body, actually, but also to discernment, to movement. This type in 3 different ways tends to move sort of towards or away from action. And oftentimes there's sort of an underlying experience of a wanting to move or inertia. So the type 8, again, that worldview, they learned early in life that the world is an unjust and an unfair place. Now, I want to say to you people listening, some of you might hear the worldview and it might not hit. So sometimes that's why the behavior can be an easier way to access this, because the worldview sometimes takes a little time to go, oh my God, I really do see the world that way. So they learn that the world is an unfair and unjust place. And so to adapt to that, this type really learned to pay attention to power, control, fairness, unfairness. And so oftentimes the type 8 is a more direct, a strong leader in that way. They're really willing to take charge of things, a high focus on strength and avoiding vulnerability. That's the type 8. And again, I could talk for 35 minutes on each of the types. So that's sort of in brief, the type 8. The type 9, the worldview of this type is that what matters most in the world is harmony and peace. And so the strategy that they learned to maintain peace and harmony is to forget their agenda, forget their own desires, and instead pay attention to others' needs, others' wants. So this type is called the mediator sometimes. The type 8 is oftentimes called the challenger. And so this type, again, that sort of body sense is they have a instinct for how other people are feeling, how other things are going, the sense of how the world is. Oftentimes this type is very outwardly presenting as relaxed, very easygoing, kind of go with the flow, but underneath there's oftentimes actually quite a lot of stubbornness and a sense of not being seen or valued. So the type 1, also a body type. So the type 1 learned early in life that the world really values that which is good and kind of harshly punishes that which is bad. So the adaptive strategy for this type is I'm going to pay attention to what is good, correct errors, and really on a sense, sometimes ones can get a little reputation to being like a little nitpicky. That's true. But underneath it, it's really a sense of like good on a moralistic sense. Like the type 1, oftentimes really there's an optimism there. They want the world to be a better place. What oftentimes shows up in the world is a person who has very high standards for themselves and other people. They can at times be a little critical, especially towards themselves. They can really struggle with things that don't feel perfect. Now, it's not all things. Sometimes I hear one say like, I have a messy bedroom, but the way that I do spreadsheets or the way that I really run my organization or the way that I think the world should be, this type is oftentimes called the reformer. It's just a constant desire to recreate the world in a better way. Type 2. So now we're in the heart center. So heart types 2, 3, and 4, I mentioned that piece about value. In 3 different ways, these 3 types really are in some ways grappling with a sense of their own innate worth and value. The The heart types tend to be more relationally oriented. They tend to focus more on connection. It's not just that they're always emotional, but it's more about that sense of who am I in the eyes of others? And so very, on that way, gifted at creating connection, maintaining relationships. Yeah. And oftentimes pay a lot of attention to being liked. So the type 2 is oftentimes called the helper. And this type learned early in life that the world really operates on some level of give to get, that my value comes from helping, from giving. And if I'm not giving and helping, I might not get love, help, attention, value. So this type is oftentimes very warm, very generous. They pay a lot of attention to other people's needs, and they oftentimes skip over their own needs. So twos they're great at being generous and kind, but they really skip over that they have needs, and they can get stuck a little bit on that level of pride of I am so good at helping other people and I don't have any needs of my own. So it can be good if you know a 2 in your life to really start to pay attention to what do they need and taking care of them too. The type 3 is called the achiever. And as we spoke about this is a type that learned early in life that their value really comes from success, from achievement. Now, sometimes people might characterize this as just the CEO. But actually, what I love about 3s is they can take any pattern and any system and say, I want to achieve here. So it could be athletics, but it's also like they might want to be the best meditator, or they might want to be the best, yoga practitioner, or whatever, best parent. But there's really a sense of I want to be the best, and they don't tend to play unless they think they can win. So for the 3, it's really a sense of their value comes from that achievement. So for the 3, that act of slowing down, paying attention to what they desire outside of what other people think will be good and successful, that can be really a good challenge. And then the type 4, still in the heart center. So the type 4 is called the individualist. Sometimes we call it the tragic romantic. This is my Enneagram type. You can hear me rolling my eyes a little bit about this type. The type 4 really learned early in life that something was left out of my creation. Something's missing, that my value is not innate because there's something that's not here. This type pays a lot of attention to their own emotions, their own experience, and a belief that they really are unique and different because something was missing and left out. They are oftentimes very unique, distinct people. This is oftentimes more the artists of the Enneagram, the kind of creative thinkers. The challenge of this type is that they tend to get kind of stuck in their own sense of emotional intensity, their own endlessly seeking for some kind of ideal in themselves and relationship, which, as you can imagine, creates a lot of suffering. So the 4, it's oftentimes like a practice of, can I actually be okay with what is, rather than longing for the past or dreaming about the future. The type 5 is called the observer. And the type 5 on the Enneagram, so we're over into the head types now. 5, 6, and 7 are head types. So head types tend to relate to the world primarily through thinking. These are people who have a priority for the rational, logical, the intellectual domain, a real comfort in thinking things through, especially on a future orientation. So the 5 learned early in life that the world actually takes more than it provides. So the way to preserve themselves is to retreat to the mind. And the mind is actually a very safe place. The mind is a place that doesn't deplete for a 5. So this is a type that they tend to pay a lot of attention to knowledge, information, facts. These are the real learners. We call them the observers because they tend to really take in the world a lot. They really prefer to think and understand before they speak, before they act. Oftentimes very much a gifted person with thinking, and can have a difficult time in terms of relationship, connection, or emotional experience because it can feel that that's depleting, that's exhausting. So a good practice for a type 5 is to start to pay more attention to, is there some feeling, and to start to act a little more spontaneously, to not just get stuck in I need to really be have all the data and all the information before I act. The type 6 is called the loyal skeptic. The type 6 learned early in life that the world is a dangerous place where bad things happen. So they really learned to scan for what could happen and be prepared to shore up survival and safety. This type, oftentimes in life, pays a lot of attention to what could go wrong and is really great at being prepared for those things. They check the tires twice before they go on a road trip. They make sure that the extra sandwich is packed just in case. There's lots of different ways that might show up. This type pays a lot of attention to making sure that they and people around them are safe. And part of that is also that they're great at being loyal, trustworthy. Trust is a real challenge for this type. And so they tend to really be pretty phenomenal at showing up for people who are struggling and want people to show up for them in that same way too. Mm-hmm. So, a growth edge for this type is really starting to look at what would it be like to see that the things might work out? Okay, you've looked at what could go wrong. You've done your devil's advocate. You've done your reading between the lines, which is great for the 6s, but they can get a little stuck in that. So, the question is actually what could go right here? Which leads me to the type 7, which is also head center of intelligence. This is called the enthusiast. And so the type 7 learned early in life that the world will limit and cause pain, which sometimes 7s are that's not how I live my life. And there's some truth to that, because part of the way that 7s live their life is avoiding pain and limitation. So what we see out on the external is a person who is fun, loving, fast thinking, enthusiastic, excited. They like lots of adventures. They like exploring new possibilities. But what it's important for a 7 to start to see is that underneath that, it's a little bit of a compulsivity, that underneath that there is a fear of feeling cut off, limited, that they might experience some pain in that discomfort. So oftentimes this type is great at the initiation, starting, visioning projects, but they can sort of dwindle off when it starts to get boring, mundane, challenging. And they oftentimes have a lot of plates spinning, because they keep on opening up new things without necessarily completing them. So it's good for a 7 to start to pay attention to what is it that I actually want to be doing versus what do I feel enthusiastic about. Mm-hmm. And the way for a 7 to do that is maybe to start to pay more attention to their body, to their feelings, and to their gut versus just what feels interesting in the head.
I always write down quotes, and then I always look up facts just to be okay, how would I understand that? Studies show that higher self-awareness is one of the strongest predictors of success in relationships and leadership. Yet 95%, which I thought that's high, of people think they're self-aware. Only about 10 or 15% of people actually are. So why do you think so many of us lack self-awareness?
Yeah. Well, I think first off, when we talk about self-awareness, I think that it's an awareness of our ego, of our personality. The ego doesn't want to be found out. It's designed to not see itself. It's really intelligent, actually, just in terms of if you look at the sort of cosmic design of humans, of course we shouldn't be able to see our ego. We would totally crumble as humans if we were always self-aware of ourselves. Sometimes it's really important just to believe who we believe ourselves to be.
Yeah.
And so the Enneagram, in that way, it's we have a belief of who we are. And if we all walked around as, non-personality humans, I kind of would be scared for what would happen on the planet, to be honest. Yeah. So I think that on some level, it's the personality of many of us is designed to believe that it's aware of ourselves. We have blind spots. And a blind spot, I like to think of it's truly a spot that I cannot see. That's why we call them blind spots.
Blind spots.
Right.
The name.
Yeah. And so I think that in terms of self-awareness, a lot of us are designed to believe that we can see the full 360 perspective of life. Or else if we didn't, we might feel totally ill-equipped to be able to make it to the grocery store and back. If I was totally self-aware and therefore doubtful of most things, I might not be able to, wake up in the morning. So I do think that there's some design to why we think we're more self-aware than we are, to answer that question.
Thank you for that. But I think when we first were introduced by to the Enneagram, I think we were reading Father Richard Rohr at the time, and he had written a book about it. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then we had a mutual friend that was like, you should dig into this more. And what I enjoyed about it is, I think someone said, when you are reading about the Enneagram, when you start reading the unhealthy stuff that makes you the most upset or feels like the most pain, sometimes is your Enneagram number. And I remember what was interesting about that as I was reading this, and I'm like, gosh, there's so many parts of all of these numbers that I can relate to and that are present. At first, I didn't want to know, kind of what were my triggers. But in the same time, I was able to understand why I did certain things and how Sarah, for example, would see certain things. So I guess from a 10,000 foot view, again, you talked a little bit about what the Enneagram means, but if someone was to be like, Michael, why should I understand my Enneagram number? Like, what is it going to do for me?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's like, let's start with the 101 of the Enneagram here. Yeah. So the Enneagram is basically, it's a complex system, but at its essence, it is a system that is pointing to 9 different ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving in the world. That's really at its essence what it's looking at. It's like there's 9 types. Each of those 9 types has a unique and distinct worldview that helps us to get through life. Each of those 9 worldviews is on some level true, and on another level is a limited perspective on reality. So what the Enneagram is pointing to is that we all have a worldview. And from that worldview, we learned to adapt. Now, at the beginning of our lives, that worldview and that adaptation were really important. If I saw that the world was a dangerous place, I got some data and information and maybe some predisposition. There's some conversation in neurobiology right now about maybe there's actually from birth, we have Enneagram, we have 9 different styles, that from that position, it only makes sense that in order to survive, I have to start to, have an adaptive strategy, which is I scan for danger and I prepare. Right. So it's very logical. Like, we all have to see the world a certain way and we all have to adapt to it. What happens is that over our lives, it starts to create some pain. So imagine you're a little kid and you learn that the world is a dangerous place where bad things happen. So you'd learn to scan for ways to keep yourself safe, to be prepared. That probably really helped you in school, kept you away from bullies, helped you choose the right path in life, helped you choose a path of security, make some money. And at a certain point, oftentimes we say it starts to grind maybe in your 30s or 40s, different times for different people. It starts to really be a cause of suffering. It's harder and harder to just walk out the door in the morning because you're so scared of what might happen. You start to doubt everyone around you. You don't believe that things are going to work out because you're still just in that sort of compulsive scanning. You're not actually open or available to the idea that things might work out. And so what you start recreating a life in which bad things happen because that's all you're looking for. That's where your focus of attention goes. You're in a persistent state of fear. You're scared. And what I'm describing is the experience of the type 6 on the Enneagram. And so when you are living in that worldview and that adaptive strategy, at a certain point, there's a choice, which is, am I committed to this being, I'm fixed? This is the way the world works. I'm stuck here, which a lot of us do. And that's when you spoke of the lowest stages of what Father Rohr was pointing to, or many Enneagram teachers have different levels of development. It's that lowest stage where we're a little bit sleepwalking through life. And there's 9 different ways that we all do that. Some version of this is the way the world is, this is the way that I am. That's a sort of fixed mentality. What the Enneagram is bringing in is, I like to think of, it's like hope, which is...
that's great to bring in.
Yeah, it's great. We could all use a little hope right now. And what it's bringing in is it doesn't have to be that way, that there is a growth mindset. There's this beautiful teaching that I work with Beatrice Chestnut and Aranio Pais, who are 2 really profound Enneagram teachers. And Beatrice Chestnut studies Dante as a metaphor for personal transformation. It's that the only way to get to paradise in Dante's story of the Divine Comedy is to go through hell and then purgatory. And she says that when we're in our type, we're in hell. We just don't know it. We're suffering. We're just at the effect of our personality. And then as we start to become aware, we start to really face and feel the ways that we've lost sight of reality, the ways that we've maybe hurt ourselves or hurt other people because of this worldview. And that's that purgatory place. But in Dante's world, what I love is that you don't do it alone. You get to rest, you get to sing. It's not that bad. What's really, really hard is staying asleep. It's just painful, I think. And a lot of us aren't so aware of how painful it can be.
Michael, I have a question. This is just something that's coming to me as we're talking. And a lot of the things that I'm reading right now is, to oversimplify it to what you're sharing before, is it feels like there's people in all of our lives that expect something to happen, and they almost manifest that bad thing to happen because they're so committed to that's the way the world works.
Yeah.
To the flip side, right? When you're like open and curious and again, I'm not trying to sugarcoat this, grateful and expectant, that seems to show up more often than not. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, well, first we're starting to talk a little bit about what feels quite mysterious, mystical in a lot of ways. So I like to preface these conversations around, it sounds like we're talking about consciousness, right? And I like to say, first baseline, I've got no effing idea. I don't think any of us do.
Well, that might just be the quote of the show. I have no effing idea.
Yeah, I had a teacher once who said, I don't know it and you don't know it. So if I don't know it and you don't know it, let's start from there.
Great.
So what I experience as direct experience with myself and with other people in my life, and what I choose to really believe, is that everything in my world is a reflection of my consciousness.
Yeah.
So if my inner, and sometimes I'm not so aware of my consciousness. So sometimes I look at the data out in the world to help me understand what my consciousness might be. So if I keep on running into violence, hate, pain, that might be an invitation for me to come in and look at, there might be some owning of there's an inner violence, there's an inner hate, there's an inner pain that consciousness is just wanting me to wake up to. Conversely, there might be just some experience of, I feel a sense of peace and equanimity, and consciousness just reflects out there. I look at the clouds and I see softness, I see sweetness in a human interaction. There's a piece of this that does relate directly to the Enneagram, which is one that I studied at the narrative Enneagram. One of the first things that they talk about is that the human system, let's say, receives about 20 million bits of data every second. It's an enormous amount of data. I don't really know what a bit of data is, but it
sounds like a lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
20 million of them. That's a lot.
Right. Yeah. And, sensations, memories, smells, sounds, there's a lot going on in here. We consciously comprehend between 15 and 40 of those. But there is a massive selective data dump that we're doing. So the Enneagram, in that piece of the worldview, it points to what is the data that we tend to orient towards. And then on a neuroplastic level, what actually happens in the brain is we start to create neural grooves in our brain that we cannot not pay attention to that when we're in our automatic patterns. So we'd say, when you're not in presence, you're in patterns. And most of us are operating in patterns most of the time. And so our brain just keeps on firing in that same narrative of consciousness. So the worldview of the type 3 operates from, my value is not innate. My value comes from success, from achievement. And you can hear in that, what a racket that must be, how exhausting that must be, because there's a sense that I don't have innate value. And so there's always this need to do more and to do more. And so that's the worldview. My value is not innate. I need to be achieving. I need to be successful. So you can imagine that the adaptive strategy creates a person who's super successful, high achieving, very competent. But over time, what starts to grate on that is that you're missing that you have value outside of what you do and what you accomplish.
Mm.
That it's not about did you fail or did you succeed? Do people like you, not like you? That you have innate worth as a human. And a lot of patterns for threes can come from I'm going to be whoever I need to be in order to get that recognition and that value and that success. And that over time, again, there can be like whoa, I really stopped checking on who I am and what I want a long time ago.
Mm.
You almost become a chameleon.
Yeah.
Become what needs to be in order to be. That creates that safety of who you are. I am successful. People see me as the success. They see me as someone who's up in front. And
Well, Michael, I'll share with you something as well. So I had a period recently where I couldn't do what I was used to doing, and it turned me upside down. There was parts of it that were beautiful.
you say that in retrospect.
No,
I was living with you.
there were still things that I was discovering about myself during that time.
Yes, but you weren't inherently happy about them.
Fair. And looking back, I think a couple things, some of the gifts of that are, first, to your point, I'm not identified by those. Like, that was complete my structure, right? Mm-hmm. And as I'm back doing things I love again, I have a different appreciation for them, but I also have a different understanding, and I'm still learning, because what you said, it's those habits, right, of going back to where you feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. Is being aware of like, wow, why am I really doing this? Mm-hmm. Am I really doing this because I am really enjoying it and I'm excited about it? Or am I doing this because I really want to accomplish this thing for recognition or whatever? And that has been the gift of that experience. So for me, the more I understand myself and where I'm at in a healthy state and where I am in an unhealthy state is becoming more and more valuable to me.
And how do you know when you're in health, unhealth? Like, what are the signals that you're getting, Justin? Maybe something you learned from the Enneagram or something you feel in your body. How do you know that?
For me, it's a lot of like, it's the body part. So there are times when there's like this creative flow that I'll be in that is so, Michael, it's like so exciting. I would relate it to probably when you're fully in character on stage and you're encompassing and you almost forget who you are and you're just there and you're present, you're living that moment. And that must be just not only intoxicating, but just like life-giving and powerful. When I'm really in the flow and there's nothing restricting me, it feels divine. And then there'll be a moment where that'll shift. I'll start getting tired and heavy, and then I'll actually start getting worried. And I feel like I'm getting into, if you look at a battery, like I'm getting into low power. I'm starting to get to an unhealthy state because I want to keep pushing and driving and try to get back to that feeling. And really my body's telling me, hey, stop, that we need to recharge and do something else, because that what you just experienced is not something that is sustainable.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And especially when I think about how challenging really paying attention to the signals of the body for rest and the signals of the body that say like, enough, you did great. And what I'd say, to your state, it sounds like you're naming a experience of presence and aliveness, as I would articulate that. Mm-hmm. And there's a spiritual dimension. We look at the Enneagram sort of through different lenses. There's the spiritual dimension of the Enneagram. There's the psychological dimension of the Enneagram. There's also the somatic, the embodied experience dimension of the Enneagram. And on the spiritual dimension, what I think I hear in your example is the Enneagram is at its essence pointing to who we are not, who we believe ourselves to be. And in that, when we start to look at who we believe ourselves to be, what each of the different dimensions of the Enneagram is pointing to is 9 different ways that we believe sort of God messed up in the construction of the universe. You know, the divine, whatever. It's not a religious sense of God, could be, but it's more a sense of that creation is imperfect. And that I want to play God a little bit here. The creation didn't make things, for the type 1, right and wrong, didn't create things perfectly. Creation didn't make sure that all of the needs got met for everyone, so I need to get involved. That's the type 2. Creation didn't create a sense of innate value and worth, so I need to get involved. Type 3. It goes on and on and on. Each of these types, it's a sense of I don't totally trust in the perfection of the creation of the universe. And so I get involved. And so Justin, when you experience these moments of feels like being almost spirit embodied, of course, then the personality is going to get a little freaked out. Got a little too close to oneness. And so I need to go and do some tricks of personality to make sure that I stay in this human experience.
And you were talking before about there's studies that maybe you're born this way. It sounds to me, though, that there is some sense of nurture, like your story of origin, how you came up in the world with your family could possibly shape your Enneagram early on.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's different schools of thoughts on this, Sarah. So what I'll say is, what just feels true for me as I work with this is that we are born with an Enneagram type.
Uh-huh.
And then stuff happens. So, and that stuff, there's a dimension which we won't get so much into today, but there's this dimension of instinct, of subtype, social self-preservation, sexual subtypes, that more and more, it does seem that it's informed by the conditions of our childhood. What happens, though, is also how your Enneagram type presents itself gets informed.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So for example, we're talking, maybe you're a type 8. There's a particular experience that
Michael, hold on. Can I just interrupt you 1 second?
Yeah.
There is you might have heard this sort of nickname before, but do you know 8s often call themselves 8 holes?
I just want to say, Sarah, I love an 8. 8s are gooey, sweet people. It's not. I think that 8s can get a little reputation.
They do get a reputation in the reality, and I'm pretty darn sure I'm an 8 because that's much more comfortable. But
here's the deal: is that for many of these types, we then interact culture, we interact gender. Mm-hmm. We interact race, we interact all sorts of external factors that start to shape and shift how that type is going to show up in the world and what kind of data we have that informs the narrative of that worldview. So as a common experience for 8 women in this culture in the United States is that they learn that the sort of instinctual behavior of the 8 is not okay. It's not okay for many women to be angry, to be aggressive. It's not okay for women to be direct. And again, you who are listening out there, you might be sort of looking at your own cultural overlays about what might be true. I'm a type 4. I definitely grew up in a world where it wasn't so welcome for boys to have feelings, for boys to be emotional. So I learned to adapt around that, and it made the way that my type showed up a little bit different in the world. Mm-hmm. So I do think that culture really does inform how our Enneagram type is going to present. Mm. So there's so
interesting because we have 4 children and they've done the tests, and I'm hearing you describe this through a mother's ear, which is I have 4 children that are 4 different, and I'm like, this is how I think, how did they get that message that might create that in the same house? Because we have a 2, a 5, a 7, and an 8 for our children. And I hear like, oh, what didn't we provide for them? That they, like that's how I know that's not really what it is. But as a mom, sometimes you're like, oh no, what message did they receive or what didn't I provide for them that created that? But I just know it's like you said, it might just be how they were born into this world and the perception of the world they see. It's not inherently that it is true. It's just how they're perceiving it.
Yeah. Well, first, Sarah, I hear what sounds like an 8 pattern of like, oh no, I didn't protect my people. I need to protect my
very
people.
much so. Very much so. Yeah, fair.
And you're right. Like this is, I think, part of the reason that I'm resting more and more in this. Like, I think the Enneagram type just it's somehow coded into us before we're born, because you can have people. I have the similar experience with my siblings. None of us are the same Enneagram type, and if you talk to us about certain parts of our childhood, it's like we were in 4 different families. And so what I like about that is, with the Enneagram, it's saying I could have an experience like in my family, we had a divorce. I could have one experience where what I was looking for in there was what's missing. Because that's what my type is looking for. And so then I'm looking that 15 to 40 bits of data, I'm selectively looking for data that says, where is something missing? Where am I being misunderstood? Where am I not being seen here? My brother, who's a 7, he might be looking at this going, how is this going to limit me and cause me pain? And how can I get out? What's the exit strategy? How can I get away from this? My other brother, who's a 5, might be looking for, how is this not supporting me? How is this not providing resource for me? And my other brother, who's a 9, is going to be looking at this and going, where is there discomfort and harmony? How can I create peace? How can I sacrifice myself to make sure things go okay? So the same event happens, but these 4 different lenses are just automatically going to show up. So I want to say to you and to parents out there, you're gonna miss it.
Yeah.
You're gonna miss it a million times.
Yes.
Like you just can't. They are predisposed to see the world through that lens.
Yeah. It's almost like they have their Enneagram glasses on from birth.
Well, I have to be honest, Michael, I think for me, that actually feels incredibly comforting. Yeah. And to Sarah's point, I was literally having the same thoughts. It's like, oh boy, when I was gone for starting the business, did that mess them up? It's like you start trying, maybe a habit of just trying to, as a dad, make sure that you loved them to the fullest or better than what you experienced.
That's it. And, I think you were kind of poking around. We were talking about, maybe parents should know about the Enneagram with their kids. Enneagram type is an amorphous experience. Getting typed isn't always clear. Some of the people who are adults that I do typing interviews with, we aren't clear right away. It's not like a blood test. Sometimes it's very clear. And with children evolve. I've got a lot of nieces and nephews. One week I'm with them, I'm thinking this kid's probably a type 5. And the next week I'm like, oh my God, I was way off. Like, no, they're showing up completely different. So what we say is, more than anything else, it's, as a parent, if you know the Enneagram, rather than saying my kid is definitely this type, you might be right, because they do have an Enneagram type. But more than anything else, it's saying my kid has a lens of reality. And from that, can I have compassion for them having a lensed experience that they're still figuring out? And that I also have a lensed experience. And so the more that I can start to soften the lens of my experience and see, if I start to look at a dilemma, like my kid won't leave for school on time, and I start to look at that from every Enneagram type's perspective, there's a 100% chance that you're going to hit on at least one way that your kid is seeing it. If you start to have the ability to expand your own dimension of how you look at life, again, there's a 1 in 9 chance as you start to experiment with how would a 3 see this? How would a 6 see this? How would a 9 see this? That you're going to see it the way that they see it.
Yeah. That's an excellent way to look at it.
Well, Michael, I want to respect your time. I know we're at time for this first episode together. And I just have to say, well, it's exceeded my expectations, because now I have 100,000 more questions for you on how this applies not only to obviously being a dad, but in marriage and in my community and in business. I'm looking forward to having you back for another episode if you're open to it.
I love that. Yeah, we can really figure it out for you, Justin. We'll crack the code on.
Yeah, he's a 3. There's no question on him then.
Yeah, I'd love to. Like I said, I could talk about the Enneagram all day.
We could listen to you talk about it all day. I find it fascinating. And every time I read something or listen to someone who's exceptionally well-versed in it, I just have it like aha moments all over the place. And I do have a question like, do you just walk around the world with your interaction going, oh, there are 5, there are 7? Like, I feel like that would like, it would be like constant, like, oh my gosh, there are 3. Oh, there's a 2. Okay.
Oh, that's great. You know, truthfully, when I first started studying the Enneagram, totally, I was like, you know, oh my gosh, this tax person, so I was living in Germany at the time. I was like, this tax person, they're such a, you know, blah, blah, blah. That's why. And I was using it as like a way to, in some ways, throw everyone around me in a box.
Yeah.
Which was, it's a fun sport. You can watch TV and you can say, oh, maybe this person's. I just went to a movie with my husband last night and we walked out and first thing we said is, well, do you think that they're a 7 or a 3? And I mean, it's like, it can be a sport. And there's another layer of it that's coming up for me now, which is like, gosh, there's a compassionate lens to it of like, there's just a human and they're having a human experience. And every person is on some ways experiencing like a limited view of reality, how much potential suffering that can create for people. So I think I want to figure it out. And I'm letting go of really typing everybody and more just being like, there is a human in there.
Yes.
And there's a human in there that doesn't know how free they are. Or maybe they do. Maybe I see someone and I go, wow, there's a person who really feels free. But ultimately, I'm really believing in the Enneagram as simply pointing us towards a more free, alive experience of self.
Now that is a way to like, boom, mic drop that one.
So, Michael, thank you, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Excited to talk again next time and really dig into some more of the nitty and gritty of it all. This has been just wonderful. I could talk about the Enneagram all day. I wish I could. Yeah. I'm jealous of your job.
It's cool. Okay. Thank you both very much.
Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Running Ahrens. We truly love having these conversations and sharing them with all of you.
If something resonated with you today, we'd be so grateful if you'd rate and review the show. It helps more people find us.
And if you know someone who'd connect with this episode, send it their way. You never know who might just need to hear it.
We'd also love to hear from you, your feedback, your stories, or even topics you'd like us to tackle next.
You can connect with us on our personal socials, the show's Facebook page, or through the website, runningahrens.today. And links are always in the show notes.
Until next time, keep showing up, stay kind, and remember,
life's the long run, and the best way forward is together.